Is it that conservatives are wrong about nearly everything? Now, I don't mean you. You have some conservative views, you have some radical views, you have some liberal views even, but that doesn't define you as a person. And I'm not talking about political parties either. If you look at like the Liberal Party of Canada, it's got many conservative members. Justin Trudeau has made many conservative decisions. Many Democratic leaders have had just as much of a conservative viewpoint. So we're not talking about political parties. We're talking about the conservative ideology or the main conservative talking points from going back from the 20s and 30s all the way up into now. The majority of major ones are just incorrect. Like, going back to the 80s, there was this idea that Dungeons and Dragons would lead people towards Satanism.
Dungeons and Dragons is a real serious problem.
This was a common conservative talking point. It was not a rare thing, and it came from the evangelical right, but it also came from many more mainstream right-wing sources, and it didn't happen. Same thing with rock and roll music. When rock and roll music came out, it was denounced as being evil.
If you listen to this music, it'll draw you right back into the clutches of Satan.
The evil feeling that you feel when you sing it.
And twisted music messages.
So the lyrics to real rock music is nothing more than satanic cyanide.
One of the most prominent Americans to attack jazz was Henry Ford.
Conservatives tried to eliminate alcohol and bring in temperance laws that would basically ban alcohol. Well, we found that failed as well. People found ways to drink. What about the war on drugs?
America's public enemy number one.
Great new national crusade.
But we haven't seen is great success of this war on drugs measure in terms of reducing the impact of drugs in society. In fact, we've seen an increase rather than a decrease. Closing on the borders did not work. Drug dealing in the United States is still handled by U.S. citizens, not by foreigners coming into the country. Plainly wrong. There was a belief that when gay rights came into play, and soon people would be marrying their pets or their cats and dogs. This was a commonly held belief. It is, you might not believe it if you're a younger person, but it was commonly held. Society hasn't been hit by meteors by God. None of this stuff came true. The trickle-down economics taught to us by Ronald Reagan.
Reducing tax rates to stimulate productivity.
When we look at the actual economic numbers, the middle class has shrunk since that period. The disparity between rich and poor has increased. We've seen great instability as a result of trickle-down economics, and a lot of these neoliberal plans have actually collapsed world economies and have caused a number of boom and bust cycles to travel through the economy. All of these things that are major conservative talking points have all been proven wrong, and by extension, the opposite view was the liberal or leftist or progressive perspective. So how is it that conservative views have been incorrect for such a long time? It seems implausible that by accident or by total coincidence, there's been a number of total failings by conservative thinkers to get anything right. And the answer is actually that it's intrinsic to the conservative worldview. Again, not yours, but by this ideology. How is it intrinsic? How dare I say that it's intrinsic? Well, the answer is quite simple. The movement of all ideas, the change of society, in other words, the learning of information, is by its very nature progressive. If you're going to learn new information, and new information is always being generated, then you must reject old information based on the evidence you have. It's not possible to hold on to conservative views and still accept contrary evidence of new things as it comes in, because it is necessary to reject the new in order to hold on to the old. You go back to the ancient history of conservative viewpoints, the idea that new things bad, old things good. That's where you get into the idea that the earth is flat.
Things like the geocentric model of the universe, that the earth is at the center of the universe. Or we have all those moral panics like blood libel, the idea that Jews were kidnapping and murdering Gentile children, which never turned out to be true. Panic of comic books, that they were going to be satanic and cause all kinds of evil strife. No evidence ever came from that. Anti-rock and roll, anti-jazz, anti-punk, every type of music has basically been rejected at some point by conservatives and considered satanic. And there's really no evidence of that. All kinds of scientific advances, everything from electricity through to the steam engine, through to the cotton gin, through to all kinds of technology we have today.
All of these ideas that have been disproved through physics and through science were originally rejected by more conservative members of the clergy, of the government, and they were wrong as well. Now you might say, but what about the opposite problem? What if you're automatically grasping onto the new ideas without looking at the evidence, and you're such a progressive that you're not even thinking about the complexities, that maybe the old idea has a nugget in it that we're just rejecting? But that's not intrinsic to the idea of progressivism. Progressivism doesn't reject all old information. If that were true, then progressives wouldn't believe, for example, that the Earth even exists, because we've had new information about the Earth and we've had to rely on old information about the Earth in order to build upon that information. You might say, like, well, we shouldn't have elections anymore. Well, why? Because we've learned some information about elections, and elections are an old idea, therefore we're going to reject them. That's just not what progressivism or the left-wing identity is actually doing. Now, you might say that there's also lots of mistakes that were made by the left throughout history. The support for some rather right-wing authoritarian leaders who purported to be left-wing, like leftist people would have supported Stalin. Definitely wrong and with hideous consequences for society. So I'm not saying that all left-wing views are automatically right. That's a false dichotomy. What I am saying is that the conservative worldview is intrinsically wrong because it is based on holding on to old ideas at the resistance to new ideas, which new ideas is the very basis for all information, not just science, but all learning is by its very nature a progression of ideas. There's no way to avoid it. You can't learn new things without learning new things. That it's just a circular disagreement if you really think otherwise. That's why when you get back to conservative viewpoints going through history, that conservatives are wrong about nearly everything.